Hello and welcome to another episode of Shattered Lives. I'm Paul Healy and I'm joined by Michael O'Toole, who has survived a torture course.
Hey, Paul.
We shall explain all. How are you, Mick?
I'm grand. I like your new background. It's basically because I keep on forgetting my name that you have to put that up so I remember who I am, isn't it?
Yes, I'm actually hiding my laundry, but it's good to get the logo in. So there it is for anyone who's watching us on YouTube.
For anybody, we've just painted our wardrobe and my wife's very proud of it, so I'm not allowed to hide it. When I say we, I didn't paint it at all. I just watched. Because if I had done it, it would not have been that nice. Let me assure you. Anyway.
Oh, you're not that handy around the house, obviously.
No. You're surprised.
Stick to the day job. Well, come here. Tell us about this HEFAT course briefly. Yes. Not that maybe people might go, oh, of course, not interested. As part of our job, we are now required to educate ourselves, so to speak, on avoiding conflicts and being what it may be like to be in a conflict zone and all of that. And as part of that, you really get put through you get put through the fucking ringer, don't you?
You do.
So tell us how you got on.
This is the second course I've done. So Mick O'Neill and I did a course in Southern England in March 2023. And you did one, I think you and Louise Bernard Paul Carr did one a wee bit later. When did you do yours?
I did it last year.
Last year, okay. So as part of this, you have to do a refresher course. So it's a HEFAT course. I only found out what HEFAT stands for in this course. Do you know what it stands for?
I should, because I did the course. So don't put me under pressure.
I didn't know. I was just calling it a HEFAT course. It's Hostile Environment First Aid. I think it's T is for training.
Yeah.
Or therapy, something like that. Right.
Yeah, we know.
So it's essentially, it's very, very interesting. So it was a 2-day course I did near London this week with Mick O'Neill as a refresher course. You have to do it every couple of years. So it's basically what you do if the shit hits the fan, right? In Ireland or abroad. So it's sort of quite humbling. There were two sort of contractors, former soldiers who are involved in IT or something. They're a wee bit secretive about the way they do. So there were plenty of non-journalists who were on this course. But of the 6 of us, there was another room we weren't part of. Of the 6 of us, 4 were hacks. 3 were from Reach. A colleague of ours from Britain was there. And then there was also a colleague from the Times of London. So it's basically what happens if either you're at home or abroad, and you know those things where you see like I have, those flak jackets and helmets. You see them wearing press and all that sort of stuff. But what happens if you're in a convoy? For us, it was if you're in a convoy and it's shut up, or what do you do, for example, if your car goes over a mine? How do you get out of the car? What do you do? Do you go forward? Do you go sideways? Do you go backwards? So I suggested, well, were it me, I would walk along the tracks that we've come through already, because we know that didn't explode, right? And you work your way back to the nearest metal road or concrete road or whatever. But there are various things about, how to avoid surveillance, how to spot if you're being surveilled, what to do. And I even think this is relevant for Ireland. People might not want to hear this, but I found in the last 4 or 5 years, people are getting more aggressive towards journalists.
Yeah. Even
at the CCJ, the courts complex in Dublin. And, my point was, and I raised this in the course, that it's almost as if people think that there's a special clause in the Constitution where you can act the bollocks with journalists, and it's as if we're expected to take it. So I thought it was very useful. It was, as I said, it was for in Ireland and for abroad. So we do go abroad quite a lot. I'm away with the Defence Forces in Lebanon and stuff. And there was actually, there was a really bad video. You remember Private Sean Rooney was murdered by Hezbollah in, I think it was December 2023. He was in what's called an AUV, an armoured utility vehicle, a big, heavily armoured jeep. But there was an incident about 2 weeks ago. The Deputy Force Commander of UNIFIL was in a similar, slightly up-armoured jeep, and it was attacked by a crowd of Hezbollah supporters, and it was set on fire. And what was really interesting, and I asked this question in the course, the armoured car was attacked. And in this video, people are getting beaten up, but they are all running for their lives. But it was very much every man or woman for themselves. So everybody had to get out of that car and run. And I said, is that what you do? Say your car is surrounded. He said, you run. You don't worry about your best mate. If he owes you 15 quid, he said, get out and run for yourself. Maybe find a rendezvous point, and then you can try and get together. And even things like, say when we were going abroad on a non-Defence Forces story, say what we really should do, say if you and I are somewhere, Mick O'Neill and I are, or you're surveilling somebody in Spain or Germany or whatever, we really should have an emergency rendezvous point because we could get separated. And it's something we never really thought. Have you ever thought of that?
No, and hopefully I'm never in a position to have to think of that, but yes.
Well, I have, and after the first course I started thinking of that, and this reinforced it. We need to hope for the best, plan for the worst.
Yeah, well, I suppose to be fair, in certain scenarios where we've had to do a bit of surveillance, yes, we have had to think about our entry point, our exit point. How do we get out of there safely? Yeah, we certainly have to think about that. But the course is very good for making you even more cognizant of how safe or unsafe you may be in certain situations. It is very informative, and you learn a lot about first aid as well. Yeah. And you're put through your ringer in regards to some situations that I suppose we're not really allowed to talk about, but they do put a shock into your system during the course, and you learn a little bit about kidnap and negotiations type scenarios, and it is fascinating, if not a little bit terrifying. But do you find that aspect informative and useful? I would guess. Oh, completely, because it's one thing to be sitting in a classroom and to be told something, but then when you're put in a scenario where you genuinely feel if maybe only for a couple of seconds that your life is in threat, and you feel your heart racing and the adrenaline pumping, then you kind of learn what you're made of or what you're not made of, and it teaches you to be ready for those scenarios maybe in the future, which, please God, touch wood, I am never in. But it was fascinating.
Without being overly sycophantic to Reach, they are very good at sending people abroad. They do believe in news, and they do believe in going abroad for news. Like you and I we've both been abroad in stories in the last couple of years. And I just thought it was really good training just to do the basics. Like, one thing we can talk about, we do this now, but say if we're going to do a doorstep or whatever, you learn very quickly to have your car pointing out of the estate. So in other words, if somebody comes at you, you don't have to drive up to the cul-de-sac and do a U and the fella's beating the crap out of the car. So your car's engine points out of the estate. So it's all various things like that. But I think, journalism is getting more dangerous. Reach, thank God, they have an international outlook on stories. So we do get sent abroad. And sometimes it's with the Defence Forces, but sometimes we're on our own. So it's a very good course, I thought, just for dealing with any issues that come along.
It is. Having said that, I'm not exactly running to go and do it again. But look, fascinating. One thing we mentioned on the pod last week, and we wanted to come back to straight away, was we mentioned knife crime, and I remember asking you about the stats on knife crime, because there is a lot of talk in the Dáil at the moment. About there was a debate recently that the government effectively isn't doing enough to tackle knife crime, and obviously they've come back and said that they have imposed harsher penalties. But I was asking the question: has knife crime, is it on the increase? And do the stats back that up? Because certainly there seems to be a sense that there is a lot of knife crime going on, particularly in Dublin at the moment. So you've gone off and done your homework, and what have you come up with?
Assault or stabbing are always vying with each other, I suppose, to be the biggest cause of death in any one year in Ireland. Shootings have gone down. There were 2, I think, in North and South last year, very, very small. There were no gangland gun murders last year, and we spoke about that. So, and I think I sort of touched on this last week. I always say that there's, on average, 1 homicide in the 32 counties every week. Now, subject to Cork, which we're going to talk about, I don't think there has been a murder or a homicide in the last week. So there have been 8 confirmed this year. 5 have been stabbings, and 3 have been alleged or have been assaults. But I'll just give you some figures now. These are my figures, and guards do not, or the PSNI do not usually say the form of death. So it's very much us going by our sources and what we hear. But for the figures I have for 2022, there were 25 assaults, 22 stabbings. For 2023, there were 16 stabbings and 19 assaults. For 2024, there were 19 stabbings and 19 assaults. So you can see that they're quite close to each other. Now, as I say, there have been 2 more stabbings this year, but the year is very young. We're not even 2 months into 2025 yet. So please God, there won't be any more, but there will. So we'll look back towards the end of the year. I'll tot it up, and we'll see if stabbings is ahead, because there can be statistical anomalies. We might not go a fortnight without a homicide. Yeah. It just happens. I remember I said there could be 3 in a week, and there could be a month when there was 1. It happens.
And so this has been, that's very interesting, and this has been a particularly interesting week in that I suppose, we've dealt with 2 stories already that we certainly thought or believed, and maybe one of them may well end up being a homicide investigation, but they've become a bit more complicated. And I've seen a bit of criticism on social media as well that, why aren't you calling it a murder or whatever? It's because sometimes these things are more complicated. So again, this story about what unfolded in Rosslare yesterday evening has become equally complicated as well. This was a massive incident, and it's one of those stories that you kind of stay late after work and you end up working all night on, as was the case for me yesterday, but that's part and parcel of the job. First thing I heard that there was an incident of some description in Rosslare, and I made a few inquiries about it, and the first thing I was told was that there was a woman dead on board the Stena Nordica. It was bound for Rosslare, coming in from Fishguard. And it made port there just around 5:30 in the evening. The Garda Public Order Unit and the Armed Support Unit were drafted out to the scene, and there was talk at the time and discussion about very serious public order violent scenes erupting on the ship. And so that is why there was a massive armed Garda presence. And then there was also talk of a body discovery on the vessel. We've now learned a lot more, but in the fog of war, so to speak, and when you're reporting something late at night, and it was well into 10, 11 o'clock at night when we were reporting these facts, we could only say so much. Yeah. And what we knew last night is that this woman had died, that she was found dead in the toilets, and that a man known to her had been arrested, and that he was seen in the vicinity of he was in the toilets as well with this woman when she was found dead. And certainly I had heard, and it's been reported by others as well, that there was some form of a melee, a scrap that happened between a number of individuals on the ship. And the way it was said to me was that seems to be more of a reaction to the body find, that tensions were high, emotions were high, and that there may have been a bit of a violent incident subsequent to the discovery of the body. But you've done a bit of digging this morning, and we've learned a lot more. So
I think it's, look, a woman's body was found. I think it was in the sort of bathroom of a cabin.
Yeah,
that's what I'm told. And I think that there were emotions running high. I think that is fair, and I think that's understandable, because the woman had died on a ferry, and it's a concentrated and contained area, and there was a large amount of people. There were a group of extended family and friends, you understand, who were coming from England to go to a funeral in the County Kildare area. So this lady died. Her name, we've understood, she's named locally as Mary Cash. She was 39 and she was living in southern England. Now, I believe she's Irish. She may have joined Irish English nationality. I'm not too sure about that. And I think at this stage, now, again, a post-mortem is underway. The emotions were running high. The public order unit was sent and the armed response unit were sent. They don't do that lightly, because it's a resources issue. So I looking back, and I don't think there was a big brawl or riot. I think there was some issue where emotions were running high, but that's understandable because someone had died. So the post-mortem is underway. It's happening on Wednesday afternoon. I would be of the belief that post-mortem will confirm the belief that I have, that this is a personal tragedy, really, and there's nothing sinister to it. And it's very, very sad for everybody involved.
It is. And nonetheless, look, again, in this incident, a man has been arrested.
Yes.
And as I mentioned, this man was in the bathroom with this dead woman who was known to him. And so in the circumstances in which he was found, he had to be arrested. But it now appears to be going in the direction that you're talking about. But it comes down to the post-mortem, doesn't it?
It does.
But nonetheless, I mean, it was obviously serious enough that the captain of the ship had called it in, and that the response to it was huge. I mean, you're talking public order and armed support. And initially, kind of everything was on lockdown because there was concerns that this was a far more violent incident than it seems to have ended up being. Well, people might go, oh, why didn't you say this, that, and the other when it's that late at night and people are still on the ship, people on the ground don't necessarily have all the information either. We were literally scrambling for any nugget of information just to be able to stand up. And that, I just wanted to talk about that for a second, because how often are we in that boat, sorry for the pun, where we kind of have to, pitch our eggs in one basket and just go for what the information that we have and at the time in which we have it. Right, we have the luxury now of a website of being able to change things, but when it comes to putting something in the paper late at night, we can only go with what we can stand over, and what we could stand over last night was very little, to be honest. And even unfortunately,
even today, I saw people on social media, and I don't believe in slagging off social media. Social media, I love it. I'm on it every day, as you know.
I love it too, but I'll slag it off any day.
Well, okay. But people were positing a certain point of view that they believe certain things had happened, and there's absolutely no evidence for that. And as I said, this is the very strong belief of the guards that this is a personal tragedy, and there was nothing suspicious to it. But people do have their own narratives and just go for it.
They do, unfortunately, and in the absence of information being out there, that vacuum, people just begin to make shit up. And that's also difficult for a journalist to navigate through, because the made up information starts getting spread like Chinese whispers, and then you're trying to navigate through what's real and what's not real. And that's hard, but that's what we're in this game for, to try and fact check and try and put out what we can.
Okay, Nathan McDonnell.
Yes. Now, this is a particularly nasty incident that happened in Portlaoise prison last Friday. And since then, there have been quite a number of developments. So it was reported that Nathan McDonnell, who people might remember, it was a prominent Tralee businessman who pleaded guilty for his involvement in the importation of €32 million worth of crystal meth, the drug made famous by Breaking Bad, this case has often been linked with Breaking Bad in terms of headlines, because it's such an extraordinary and strange case where this individual was pressurized, and so he said, into getting involved with unsavory individuals and storing this level of drugs for them. He was badly assaulted in Portlaoise prison in his cell, and he was taken to hospital after he received a broken jaw in the incident. Subsequently, I found out that he had been brought back to prison only to have to go back to hospital again yesterday, where he required surgery for that broken jaw, and he'll require ongoing treatment through the course of the week. He is actually to be sentenced this Friday for his role in this plot, and he's looking at potentially a hefty jail sentence for it.
Very, very hefty. Up to the judges, but yeah.
It is up to the judges, of course. But he was assaulted by, it seems anyway, it is suspected that he was assaulted by a very serious criminal by the name of Glenn Thompson, who people may remember was jailed for his role in conspiracy to try and kill Patsy Hutch, a brother of Jerry the Monk Hutch. And he was doing that at the behest of the Kinahan cartel. And so himself and his brother, Glenn and Gary Thompson, were both locked up for that. And Glenn Thompson is serving a 12-year sentence. So supposedly, Glenn Thompson punched Mr. McDonnell in the face in a cell, and he punched him hard enough that he broke his jaw. So there's been a lot of talk and speculation since then as to what was the motive behind this, and is Mr. McDonnell being pressurized in some way? Has he fallen out with particular drug gangs for, maybe pleading guilty, and maybe there's suspicions that he's talking to people and whatnot, but there seems to be nothing to that other than this may well just be a personal dispute between cellmates. It may be as simple as that, but nonetheless, he got a serious hiding.
It's funny. I remember talking to a Republican years ago, and no, this was years and years ago, and he was talking about an incident in Portlaoise, because Portlaoise, it's a top security prison, and it's where Republicans were held during the Troubles. And I always remember him saying that in prison, small things become big. So you and I imagine the thought, you and I might have a disagreement.
Yeah, I've wanted to punch you in the face a few times.
Well, yeah, but thank God this is remote. But in prison, the normal very, very quickly becomes abnormal. So, it's become very concentrated and take a life of their own. So it may have been something tiny. You just don't know that it would be tiny to you and me, but in their, they lose perspective, I suppose. So I've always remembered that Republican saying that to me.
Yeah, and I think it is possibly as simple as that. But look, nonetheless, my information was that Glenn Thompson has been sanctioned for this. He has been given what's called a P19, which, under the subject of a P19, you are sanctioned to things like reduced tuck shop visits, gym visits, actual visits from members of your family and friends, and phone calls as well. And I understand he's been moved off the landing that he shared with Nathan McDonnell to a more restricted regime.
And do you usually lose a bit of remission as well? It's a couple of weeks remission, I think, with the P19, is it?
I mean, those things are on the table. It depends on, I think, how much he's offending. Now, Glenn Thompson was already moved out of Mountjoy prison back in August of last year because there was, you may remember, a large seizure of contraband and an incident as well in which a prison officer was threatened. And he was one of a number of prisoners who were moved around as a result of that incident. But a solicitor for Nathan McDonnell has actually spoken out, and I spoke to him myself yesterday as well, Porrig O'Connell.
And fantastic solicitor.
Yeah, and gentlemen, in fairness, he answered the phone to me and was happy to talk to me. And Porrig is representing Mr. McDonnell, and his view is that his client was not protected in prison, and he wants a safety plan put in place for Nathan McDonnell when he goes back into Portlaoise prison, the country's maximum security prison, by the way. He wants a safety plan for him. The Irish Prison Service says it won't comment on security or on individual prisoners, but was made aware of those concerns. And he also called for a Garda investigation, and I now understand that there is a Garda investigation into this particular assault.
So so that can often run parallel to the Prison Service's inquiry, I suppose. So yeah, they can investigate.
I think the fact that Thompson has already been sanctioned, though, says that they have firmly and squarely placed it on his shoulders and said he is responsible for it. So it's not as though there is any other individual suspected of anything here. It was an incident between Glenn Thompson and Nathan McDonnell.
But breaking somebody's jaw is clearly assault causing harm. It's not what they call a Section 2 assault, it's Section 3. So that's an indictable offence. So if the guards do investigate it, you could get 2 or 3 or 4 years added on to his prison sentence, but who knows? It's a long way to go before that, even if I don't know if the investigation has begun. So
it has begun, They confirmed it as of yesterday to me yesterday evening. No, it's fascinating in one sense, isn't it? Because Nathan McDonnell is certainly someone who wouldn't be used to prison. I mean, he was somebody who rubbed shoulders with politicians. He was a very wealthy businessman and once respected. And now he's in fear for his life because he's just been punched in the face by a very serious and hardened criminal. And he's looking at the prospect of many, many years behind bars with these unsavoury characters. They've obviously felt the need to put him in the maximum security prison for a reason. He is on remand at the moment. So will they keep him in Portlaoise? Will they move him to a more
Cork, maybe?
Cork prison or a quote unquote cushier prison? We'll have to see what happens there.
Okay. Shall we talk about my Russian friend?
Yeah. Now, so tell us about this. How did this come about in the first place? How did you end up going to the Russian embassy, Michael?
Okay. So I did a story last week, putting my defence hat on, about the increase in defence spending that's going to be happening in the next 4, 5, 6 years in Ireland. And I know that there are various schemes and various rearmament schemes that the government has committed to or is about to commit to. So hundreds of new armoured vehicles for the army, a new MRV ship for the naval service, in the mid-distant future, 8 helicopters to replace the 6 AW139s the Air Corps have. They've bought the Dassault government jet. So I worked it out at about 2 billion extra in the next 5 or 6 years. And that's an awful lot in capital spending, right? So that's a huge amount. And even after I wrote the story, the Tánaiste, Simon Harris, came out Micheál Martin, the Taoiseach, Jennifer Carroll McNeil, the Health Minister, all came out and said, we need to ramp up defence spending. So I was sitting there after I'd written the story and I said, hold on a second here. Ireland is not rearming because of the threat from America, right? So undersea cables by Russia, and European countries do genuinely feel threatened by Russia. So I was sitting there one day and I said, hold on a second, why don't we go and ask the man himself? So I sent an email to the Russian embassy in Dublin. Well, any chance you're arming, you're not really expecting an email? Yeah. And I got one back. I got one back saying, he's free on Wednesday. I said, holy shit. So we did. So Mick and I went up. So it was mostly about that. And he was talking, basically, I asked him, Ireland is rearming because of Russia, which it is, right? The perceived threat from Russia. That's the truth, right? People can go balubas. That's why they're doing it. They're not worried about Donald Trump invading. They're worried about an increased threat from Russia. That's part of it. And they also have to improve their own force protection, the armoured vehicles. They need to patrol our seas properly, the MRV. They need proper helicopters, all this sort of stuff, right? So essentially, Mr. Filatov, the ambassador, said, Russia is no threat to Ireland. And he said it's part of this propaganda in Western Europe that Russia is the bogeyman. Now, Russia illegally invaded Ukraine. Countries like the Baltics and Poland and Romania and Moldova, they're closer to Russia than we are, and they're all very nervous. So, that's their facts, right? But he kept on saying Russia is no threat to Ireland. But at the end, I chanced my arm and I wanted to ask him about the Kinahan cartel, because we know they're in Dubai. We know that there's an extradition treaty has been signed. It's going to be enacted very soon. And there is a theory that if the Kinahans realise that the guards are coming for them, which they want to, they'll get out of Dodge. So how much media speculation have we seen? We've been involved in about where can the Kinahans go? Tajikistan, Iran, that tax-free island off Iran. Where else do we hear? Singapore, Thailand, Southeast Asia, all the stands, Uzbekistan and everything. But they've also heard Russia. So I wanted to ask Mr. Filatov, what would you do if the Kinahans went to Russia? And I thought he'd go, oh no, this is nonsense. He said, I've heard of the Kinahans. We are a very law-abiding country. We have very strong anti-gangland laws. In Russia, the Kinahans are not welcome in Russia. And he goes, for Russia, it is no-go. So I thought that was a great story. So we did that. But there was one very funny incident outside. There's a guard car permanently at the entrance. Okay, so you have to walk past it, then get in. Marked guard car. But and I noticed it the first time on Orwell Road in Rathgar, there were all these Ukrainian flags along that street where the Russian embassy is. That's grand, and there were barriers for protest. But we were walking out, and there was a small knot of very well-to-do pensioners who were protesting. They were carrying Ukrainian flags, maybe 4 or 5. We were walking out, and I saw us walking out, and they started shouting, shame on you, shame on Russia. Did it 3 or 4 times. And you ignore it, right? So I eventually walked over to them. I had to go that way. And I said, look, sir, we're reporters. And he went, oh, I'm terribly sorry. It was the politest crowd I've ever seen. I wish all protesters were like that.
Oh, that's very gentlemanly of them.
Very, very nice people. Very mannerly.
Very nice. I would be very skeptical, as would probably many of the claims by Russia that, I suppose it's framed in such a way we're not a threat to Ireland. That may well be true, but I think our country is in many ways looked at as a soft touch. And this certainly people in the intelligence world have come out and said this, for the Russians to take advantage of in order to be able to spy on the UK. They don't care about Ireland. It's the UK, and we are a backdoor to the UK for Russia.
100%. And there's also the fact that when you go past Mayo, Black Sod, the next bit of land, I think, is America.
It's the US, yes.
So it goes from Ireland, big bit of water, then America. Ireland is strategically important. We know that Russian Bear bombers go in, not the Irish coast, but in the Irish EEZ, the economic zone there. They fly there, and we don't have any jets, so the RAF, in this secret deal, send up jets to monitor them and escort them. So we are a strategically important country. We're neutral. A lot of people support neutrality, some don't. But we are a strategically important country.
but it's one thing to be neutral, but then we literally have spies operating within our country in order
allegedly
to
within the
them.
Oireachtas.
Well, yes. So yeah, look, he's telling you the truth probably in that it's no threat to Ireland, but certainly Ireland is being used, I think, to continue their cause against the United States and the UK and Europe. So
I thought it was important journalistically, as our bosses always tell us, go to the man, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought, right, well, I've written about rearmament. I'm going to go to the man. And he is entitled, I'm entitled to ask him questions. He is entitled to answer. And one very interesting comment he made, you may remember there was a former Army Ranger Wing operator called Robert Deegan, 29-year-old, who was killed in Ukraine fighting against the Russian invaders. And I asked him about, it's believed, intelligence sources would tell me that there is maybe 150 Irish people have gone over there to fight. Wow. And Mr. Filatov said, don't go. It's not your war. And you're making what he said was possibly a fatal mistake if you go there. But people have the right to do as they wish.
Yeah, people have the right to do as they wish. And remember, I think that it is factually borne out that Russia is the aggressor and the invader of a sovereign nation here. So as much as maybe they want to term it as a war, we should finish with this. Obviously, it is an ongoing, as a recording of this podcast, there is a new search going on up in the Drogheda area for the missing child, Kyran Durnin. So you're on this today, Mick. Tell us a bit about it.
Well, yeah, our colleague Nicola Donnelly's looking after this. But it's very interesting. There's another search. We know that there was a serious search operation in Dundalk in County Louth. Just for background, Kyran was effectively a Drogheda resident, but he and his mother did spend time in Dundalk in County Louth, and he was last seen, I believe, May 2022 at a school in Dundalk. So there has been a significant investigation into him. You'll know that we broke the story that he was missing, and it was September last year. I think we broke the story about this boy that they feared was being missing and was dead, and then the Gardaí upgraded it to a murder inquiry. Unfortunately, so that was in October last year. Unfortunately, there is a murder inquiry, but they haven't found Kyran's body. So there is a significant search at a location in Drogheda today. Nicola's information is that dig will probably go into Thursday. I don't know how hopeful the guards are, but they're doing what they can, and I've always stressed this, and I've said this in several pods. One of the Garda's main priorities in this investigation is to find Kyran and give him a Christian burial, because he's out there somewhere, and they want to know where he is, and they want to bring home to the loved ones and get a Christian burial for that young boy. And it's heartbreaking to think that he's out there somewhere. It doesn't bear thinking about.
It doesn't. It's a truly baffling case, and it's great to see that Gardaí are continuing to carry out searches. They have by no means given up on this search. And they, as you said, they do believe his body is out there. They do believe he was murdered. Again, factually, it is known that media outlets have attempted to speak to Kyran's mother. Indeed, Nicola Donnelly, our colleague, actually went over to the UK and tried to speak to her, and she wouldn't speak to her. And Kyran's grandmother as well, there have been efforts to try and speak with her. She doesn't answer the door, and I know that the BBC tried to speak with her, and she wouldn't speak to them either. Look, that's the way they've chosen to deal with the situation. It's just a very, very strange case altogether. And so hopefully Gardaí get to the bottom of where he is and who is responsible for the cover-up of his death. Yes,
and Paul, you and I know that we hear things that we can't put into the public domain at the time, but we were speaking about this when we knew that young Kyran was missing in September, and I do know that there is a special inquiry team based mostly from Gardaí and Drogheda. There's some national units involved with them, but they are working morning, noon and night expressly to find Kyran. They are really determined to find that boy.
And there's been lots of twists and turns in this case. Obviously, there was an individual who was arrested, a person of interest, who took his own life now, and he provided absolutely no answers in the wake of his death. And there are other persons of interest who have been less than cooperative with Gardaí as well. So they're doing their best whilst also being pressed up against a brick wall of silence. But there are people clearly who know what happened to that child, and the pressure is on them.
Yeah. And hopefully the pressure will tell. It just I've been thinking about this a lot recently, the importance of being able to say goodbye to loved ones. I mean, you think of Deirdre Jacob, Jojo Dollard, Fiona Pender, just the visceral need for families and loved ones to have a body to say goodbye to them and to go somewhere where they can mourn, because that child is out there. Yeah, that child is out there somewhere, and there are people who want that child back and who care for that child deeply.
Hopefully they get answers sooner rather than later. We'll leave it there, I think. Thank you very much to everybody for listening to us. And as always, we'll be back next week. Thank you.
Thanks very much.